December 20th, 1943. High above Nazi Germany, the winter sky is a killing field. A lone American bomber drifts through the clouds, barely alive. Its aluminum skin is torn open. Engines cough and sputter. Blood freezes where it splashed against the fuselage. Inside, young men cling to consciousness, counting seconds to a certain death. Then, something impossible happens. A German fighter slides into view. A Messerschmitt Bf-109. Close enough to see the pilot's face, close enough to kill them all in a single burst of cannon fire. But the German doesn't shoot. Instead, he flies beside them. This is not a myth. This is not propaganda. This is a real moment, witnessed by men who should never have survived it. A moment when war paused, just long enough for mercy to enter the sky. This is the story of Charlie Brown and Franz Stiegler, and it begins with one mission that was never supposed to end in anything other than death. By late 1943, the air war over Europe had become brutally efficient. Every day, massive formations of American B-17 flying fortresses pushed deep into German airspace. Their goal was simple: destroy the industrial heart of the Third Reich. Their cost was horrific. Daylight bombing missions were a gamble with staggering odds. A bomber crew was expected to complete 25 missions. Only few did. Some units suffered casualty rates so high that survival beyond the first few sorties was considered luck, not skill. The B-17 was built to endure punishment, bristling with machine guns, armored, resilient. But no plane was invincible. German flak tore through formations like shrapnel storms, and Luftwaffe fighters exploited every weakness, waiting for the moment bombers turned for home, slow and exposed. For German pilots, the rules were clear: shoot down the enemy or be shot down yourself. For American crews, it was the same equation, except they were flying straight into it. On this freezing December morning, one of those crews was led by a 21-year-old second lieutenant named Charlie Brown. Brown was barely old enough to shave regularly, let alone command a heavy bomber. He had trained for this moment for years, yet nothing could prepare him for the weight of it. This was his first combat mission as aircraft commander. His plane was a B-17F named Year-Old Pub. 10 men aboard. Each of them carried private fears they didn't speak out loud. Some wrote letters the night before. Some prayed. Some joked too loudly. Their target was Bremen, a vital industrial city producing U-boats and war material critical to Germany's survival. It was heavily defended, everyone knew that. As engines roared to life and the bomber rolled down the runway, Brown felt the pressure settle into his chest. Once airborne, there was no turning back, no emergency exit, no pause button. The formation assembled in the sky, dozens of bombers locking into position, stretching across the horizon like a mechanical armada. Below them, England disappeared. Ahead of them, Germany waited. Inside Year-Old Pub, the crew checked weapons, oxygen, intercoms. Nervous banter crackled through headsets. Brown stared ahead, forcing calm into his voice. He had to sound confident. Lives depended on it. As the bombers crossed the coastline and entered enemy territory, silence replaced chatter. Every man knew what came next: flak, fighters, fire. Charlie Brown tightened his grip on the controls and flew onward, unaware that before the day ended, he would meet the enemy face to face. Not as a target, but as a fellow human being. And neither of them would ever forget it. The sky over Bremen erupts without warning. Black bursts of flak explode around the formation, violent and precise, ripping holes through the cold air. The bombers fly straight into it, because they have to. Turning away now would scatter the formation and invite slaughter. Inside Year-Old Pub, the first shockwave slams through the fuselage like a giant's fist. Metal screams. The aircraft shudders. Instruments flicker. Somewhere in the plane, a man shouts that they've been hit. Charlie Brown keeps the bomber steady, forcing it forward as flak continues to detonate around them. Each explosion is calculated. German gunners bracketing the formation, walking their fire closer with terrifying accuracy. Then another hit. The nose of the aircraft is ripped open. Plexiglass vanishes in an instant, blown away into the sky. Freezing air roars inside, dragging maps, debris, and blood with it. The bombardier is exposed to the open sky, inches from nothingness. This is the most dangerous moment of the entire mission. The bombers must fly straight and level. Predictable, slow, defenseless. Flak tears through Ye Olde pub again. An engine coughs, then dies. Fire warnings scream in Brown's ears, but he holds the course. The bombs drop. The plane lurches upward as thousands of pounds of explosives fall away toward Bremen below, and then the formation turns. This is when the fighters come. German Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs slash into the bombers like wolves hitting a wounded herd. Machine gun fire rakes aluminum skins. Cannon shells detonate inside wings and fuselages. Your old pub is hit again and again. One engine is destroyed outright, another begins to fail. The oxygen system is shredded. At high altitude, men begin to black out, gasping, clawing at their masks. The tail gunner goes silent. No call, no scream, just nothing. Charlie Brown doesn't know it yet, but the man behind him is already dead. Hydraulics fail. Control surfaces respond sluggishly. The plane can't hold formation anymore. Brown fights the yoke, muscles burning, sweat freezing inside his gloves. Then a voice crackles through the intercom. Panicked, strained. The ball turret gunner has been hit. He's bleeding. Badly. And worse, he can't get out. The turret is jammed. The small rotating sphere hangs beneath the bomber like a coffin. If the landing gear fails later, he will be crushed. Another burst of fire rips through the fuselage. The bomber drops lower, slower, and then it happens. Ye Olde pub falls out of formation. Instantly they are alone. No overlapping fields of fire, no protection. Just a crippled bomber drifting through enemy airspace like a wounded animal, trailing blood. German fighters circle in. Brown shoves the throttles forward, but the engines won't give him what he needs. The aircraft begins to spiral downward. The altimeter unwinds. The ground rises. This is it. Inside the cockpit, Brown makes a decision that feels final. He pulls back with everything he has, fighting the controls, refusing to let the plane die without a fight. The bomber shudders violently, then stabilizes. Barely. They are now flying impossibly low, less than 200 feet above the ground. Snow-covered fields and dark forests race beneath them, church steeples and rooftops flash past. They are so low that German civilians look up in shock. Inside the plane, the situation is hopeless. Multiple crew members are wounded. One is dead. The ball turret gunner is trapped and fading. Ammunition is nearly gone. Guns are frozen or destroyed. And yet, somehow, the bomber stays in the air. Charlie Brown knows the truth. They will not make it home. At best, they will crash. At worst, they will be torn apart by fighters or flak before that happens. Certain death no longer feels dramatic. It feels inevitable. And that is when fate sends something racing up behind them. Fast, precise, and painted in the colors of the enemy. A single German fighter. Closing in. The German fighter climbs hard from the snow-covered fields below, engine screaming as it closes the distance. It is a Messerschmitt Bf 109, sleek and deadly, one of the most lethal interceptors in the European sky. Inside Ye Olde pub, the crew braces for the end. Gunners struggle to bring weapons to bear, but many guns are frozen or destroyed. Ammunition is nearly gone. The tail gun remains silent, its operator slumped and lifeless. The ball turret hangs beneath the bomber, its wounded gunner trapped inside, bleeding and helpless. Charlie Brown sees the fighter pull in close enough that he can see the black cross on its wings. This is the moment they've been waiting for and dreading. Cut away. On a German airfield not far below, Oberleutnant Franz Stigler has just landed. His Messerschmitt rolls to a stop, ground crew rushing in. Stigler is already a seasoned fighter pilot, 27 confirmed kills. One more, and he will earn the Knight's Cross, one of Nazi Germany's highest military honors. A single kill stands between him and legend. Then someone shouts. A crippled American bomber is limping away at low altitude. Stigler doesn't hesitate. He jumps back into his cockpit. The engine roars. Within moments, his fighter claws into the air, climbing fast. From above, he spots it immediately. A lone B-17, slow, damaged, separated from its formation. To Stigler, this looks like the easiest kill of his career. He lines up behind the bomber, thumb resting near the trigger. One short burst from his cannons would tear the aircraft apart. 10 enemies, one pull of the finger. As he closes in, something makes him pause. He pulls alongside instead of firing, just to confirm the kill. And then he sees it. The bomber is destroyed, the nose is gone. Jagged metal frames the open sky. Holes pepper the fuselage so large he can see inside. Wounded men move sluggishly, some slumped against the walls. Blood stains the aircraft's skin. At the tail, the gunner is motionless, clearly dead. Below, in the ball turret, a man is trapped, his head slumped, blood visible even from a distance. This is not a fighting aircraft, it is a flying wreck. And at the controls, Stigler sees something else. A young pilot, barely more than a boy, hunched forward, fighting desperately to keep the plane level. His movements are rigid, exhausted, driven by sheer refusal to give up. For a moment, the sky is silent. Stigler feels something tighten in his chest. This isn't combat anymore. This is execution. His training tells him what to do. His country expects it. His score demands it. The Knight's Cross is right there, waiting. But another voice speaks louder. A memory. His former commanding officer, his words echo in his mind. Words drilled into him early in the war. If I ever see or hear of you shooting at a man in a parachute, I will shoot you myself. There was a code among fighter pilots once. A line that wasn't crossed. An understanding that some acts stripped a man of honor forever. Stigler realizes the truth in an instant. Shooting this bomber would be no different than firing into parachutes. These men are already beaten. They are already dying. And if he kills them now, he will carry it with him for the rest of his life. Stigler lowers his weapons. Inside Ye Olde pub, the crew can't understand what's happening. The German fighter stays close, but doesn't fire. Brown watches him slide alongside the cockpit. Their eyes meet, enemy to enemy, human to human. In that look, Brown sees no hatred, no triumph, only a decision being made. Franz Stigler knows what comes next will end his career if discovered, possibly his life. But he also knows something else. If he walks away from this moment, he will still be able to live with himself. He makes his choice. And then he does something that has no place in war. He moves into position, not to kill, but to protect. Franz Stigler eases his Messerschmitt closer, matching the crippled bomber's speed with delicate precision. The two aircraft fly so near that a single mistake could send them both spiraling into the frozen fields below. Inside Ye Olde pub, panic spreads. Some of the gunners shout to open fire. This has to be a trick. No enemy gets this close without killing intent. Fingers tighten on triggers. Charlie Brown raises his voice over the intercom. "Hold your fire!" He doesn't fully understand why he says it, only that something about the Germans' behavior feels wrong, different. The fighter stays off their guns, off their blind spots. He's not lining up a shot. Then the German pilot begins to gesture. Stigler points away from Germany, angling his aircraft toward the north. He motions repeatedly, firm, insistent. Sweden, neutral territory. If the bomber turns now, there is a chance, however small, that the crew might live. Brown stares, confused and terrified. His training screams at him not to trust this. Every instinct says deception. He shakes his head, trying to wave the fighter away. Stigler doesn't leave. Instead, he slides even closer, wingtip to wingtip. Close enough that Brown can see his face clearly now. Calm, focused, determined. Then Stigler does something even more dangerous. He moves into a position between the bomber and the ground. German flak batteries line the countryside below. At this altitude, a single shell would shred the B-17. But with a German fighter flying formation beside it, flak crews hesitate. Firing now risks hitting one of their own. Stigler knows this. He also knows other German fighters could appear at any moment, so he stays. For long, unreal minutes, the sky holds an image that defies everything the war has become: an American bomber and a German fighter flying together as if they belong to the same side. Inside Ye Olde pub, the crew watches in stunned silence. The wounded men cling to consciousness. The ball turret gunner bleeds quietly below them. The dead tail gunner remains slumped at his post. Brown keeps the bomber steady, afraid that any sudden movement might shatter the fragile trust holding them together. The crew debates in whispers. Some still want to shoot, Others can't bring themselves to aim at a man who is clearly saving them. Brown's order stands. No one fires. Eventually, the coastline appears ahead, the dark edge of the North Sea. They are leaving Germany now. This is as far as Franz Stiegler can go. Beyond this point, he would be escorting the enemy into freedom. If anyone saw him cross the coast, there would be no explanation that could save him. Stiegler pulls slightly ahead, then rolls his aircraft gently to the side. He looks at Charlie Brown one last time and salutes, not a Nazi salute, not a political gesture, a pilot's salute. Then he banks away, his Messerschmitt shrinking into the grey sky as he turns back toward Germany and whatever consequences await him. Inside Ye Olde pub, no one speaks for several seconds. Then the engines drone on. Against all logic, against all probability, the bomber crosses the sea. Fuel is nearly gone. Controls barely respond. The landing gear refuses to lock properly. They reach England at last. At RAF Seething, the bomber limps onto the runway and slams down hard. Ground crews rush forward, staring in disbelief at the wreck in front of them. They count the holes, the destroyed engines, the missing nose, the dead gunner. One mechanic finally says what everyone is thinking. "How did this thing even fly?" Charlie Brown doesn't answer. He's still thinking about the German pilot who chose not to pull the trigger. When the adrenaline fades, reality returns. Charlie Brown is called in to file his mission report. Intelligence officers sit across from him, flipping through papers, asking precise questions. Aircraft damage, enemy engagements, crew casualties. Brown tells them the truth. A German fighter intercepted his bomber, flew alongside it, escorted it out of Germany. The room goes quiet. The officers exchange looks. Then one of them leans forward and speaks slowly, carefully. "That didn't happen," Brown insists. He describes the gestures, the escort, the salute. The response is immediate and final. He is ordered never to mention it again. Stories like that damage morale. They blur the lines of enemy and ally. In wartime, ambiguity is dangerous. The official record lists no such encounter. Charlie Brown obeys. Across the front lines, Franz Stiegler lands his Messerschmitt back at base. He climbs out of the cockpit, face unreadable. No one asks questions. No one knows what he's done. And he tells no one. Because in the Luftwaffe, mercy toward the enemy is not bravery. It is treason. The penalty is execution. So Stiegler locks the memory away. He continues flying. He survives the war. He leaves Germany behind and eventually settles in Canada, building a quiet life far removed from the sky that once demanded impossible choices. Charlie Brown finishes the war too. He returns home, he marries, he raises a family. He lives the life he was never supposed to have. But the memory never fades. For both men, that frozen moment over Germany remains unfinished. An unanswered question hanging in the air. Then, in 1986, more than 4 decades later, Charlie Brown decides he can't carry it alone anymore. He begins searching. He places ads in aviation magazines and fighter pilot newsletters. He writes letters. He tells the story again and again, hoping someone will recognize it. Years pass. No replies. Brown nearly gives up. Then in 1990, a letter arrives. The handwriting is careful. The message is brief. "I was the pilot of the Messerschmitt." It is signed, Franz Stiegler. When the two men finally meet, 47 years have passed since they last looked at each other through cockpit glass. The recognition is immediate. They sit together and begin comparing memories, altitudes, damage, gestures. Every detail matches perfectly. There is no doubt. This is real. What begins as conversation becomes friendship. They visit air shows together. They stand side by side, once enemies, now brothers bound by a single decision. They tell their story publicly, not as a tale of war, but of humanity. Charlie Brown often says that Franz Stiegler saved his life. Franz Stiegler always replies the same way. "No, I did not save your life. I saved my soul." The two men remain close friends until the end. In an almost poetic symmetry, both die in 2008, within months of each other. Their story ends as it began, in quiet balance, because what they shared wasn't victory. It was mercy. War is designed to strip people down to uniforms, targets, statistics. It teaches us that survival depends on destroying the person in front of us before they destroy us. But on December 20th, 1943, two men proved that war does not get the final say. Franz Stigler chose conscience over command. Charlie Brown chose trust over fear. In a sky filled with fire and death, they created a moment of humanity that outlived the war itself. This story matters because it reminds us that even in the darkest systems, individuals still choose who they become. Orders can demand obedience, but they cannot erase honor. History often celebrates destruction, but sometimes the bravest act is restraint. Sometimes the most powerful weapon is mercy. Remember their story, remember their choice, because war creates enemies, but humanity creates something stronger.